All right, I want to welcome everybody into the Fifth Dimension podcast with me, Evan McDermott. For today's show, I want to unpack and ultimately decode the architecture of the Matrix. Now, the Matrix in itself is a very loaded topic. Everybody has their own idea, belief, way of explaining and articulating what the Matrix is, but the point of this podcast is to break it down in a way to where we can have a unified definition and understanding on what the Matrix is, right? Because I think a lot of people really misunderstand what the Matrix is, right? They view it as a prison, and in a lot of ways, it does control perception, creates limitations, but ultimately, the Matrix is not the one dictating reality, you are. And this podcast in particular is meant to serve as an opportunity to recognize the frameworks of reality and use that to become more self-empowered. Right? The Matrix is not one thing. It is a multi-layered system. And we're going to break down what that system is. And ultimately, we need to recognize that what we see as the world and our experiences, that's only a very small fraction of true reality. We live in a multi-dimensional, multifaceted plane of consciousness. Reality is not discovered but constructed. And ultimately, if we are to take control of our world, if we want to create a world that is built around the principles of love and unity and abundance, we need to understand what the building blocks of reality are. Because it is the true visionaries that move us in the direction uh, as a collective. You are a part of the construction of the world and the reality that you want to be living in the world that you want to be living in, the country that you want to be living in, the community, your family. Break it all the way from micro to macro and vice versa. But you need to understand what this reality is. And like I said, there's a lot of misconceptions on the Matrix, and this podcast is going to break it down in a way that I personally haven't heard anybody else do it. So take it as you will, take what resonates, and use this as a tool for self-empowerment and liberation. But before we jump in, if you're a fan of the show, subscribe whatever platform you are on. You can head over to my Substack, McDermod, McDermod.substack.com. It's all free on there. You can do a paid subscription. It's just a way to support my work. And another way to support my work would be to purchase a copy of my new poetry collection, Seasons of Becoming. If you're a fan of the show, you would likely be a fan of a lot of the poems in there and the concepts that we really articulate and dive into. So I would encourage y'all to check that out. Seasons of Becoming, the link to do so is in the episode show notes below. And you can also book a one-on-one tarot reading with me. I do individual consultations. I got some spots for them. And it's interesting because the way I do tarot is very much in alignment with what I'm going to be talking about here today in terms of uncovering the truth of our reality and looking at the building blocks and looking at the foundations. Now, a lot of people view, especially in like Christian circles, and I know I got some listeners who feel this way about tarot. I've been told, Evan, repent a couple times, which I get it, it's fine. But even in Deuteronomy, when we're looking at the Bible, it talks about divination being demonic. Tarot, all tarot cards are in a map of the subconscious mind. So when you're pulling a tarot card, you're looking at an image within your own subconscious. Right? So there's no going out there. It's all in. Right? So that's a big misconception on what tarot is. I'm not gonna dive. I'm not doing a deep dive on that right now. It would be an interesting podcast topic for sure. Maybe something I will explore because I got a lot of solo deep dives that I'm going to continue to do, as well as many great interviews. Um, but I just thought I'd throw that out there for anybody who's a little like, I don't know about tarot. It's a deep dive into your own subconscious, regardless of what subject or questions you have about tarot. Now, you can certainly tap into other people's energies. We do have a unified mind at the unconscious level, so you can get answers, I guess, about I don't know, relationships and all that stuff and tap into the other person's energy field. But again, that's going inward and discovering all of that energy lives within you. So, um, and we'll talk a little bit about the unified field in this podcast. If you're kind of like, Evan, what the heck are you talking about? We will dive into what the unified field is in this podcast because it is a building block of reality. And I've talked quite a bit about it on recent podcasts as well. So if you've been tuning in and you're solid on that, hey, that you're already well on the way of decoding the architecture of the matrix. And hopefully this podcast can serve as a little bit more of reinforcement of what you already know. Because I think we all intuitively know this stuff. It's just when we hear it, we're like, that makes sense. All right. So let's jump into it, man. The Matrix in itself, obviously everybody thinks of the movie, that great sci-fi trope, if you will. Right. But really the Matrix is a metaphor. This is a word that's being used by mystics, physicists, occultists, shamans for millennia. Right? It's not new. And because of that, because it's being thrown around a lot right now, I do think it's important to go back to the original definition, to look at the etymology of the word, right? And when we're looking at the etymology of the word, it's actually a 14th century French derivative from matrice, which comes from uterus or womb. Now, I want you to reflect, the listener, before I give my interpretation on that. If we are looking at the matrix as a building block of our reality, of our society, but the original meaning is womb, uterus. What is the purpose of a womb? What is the purpose of a uterus? What might that mean for the purpose of the matrix in our society? Think about that. Reflect on that. Feel that within yourself. It can be hard to articulate, but I think you know where I'm going here. If the matrix is a womb, it is a uterus, it is a mother, an origin, that which is enclosing and giving, creating the elements and the alchemizing into a birth later on. You got to understand that when we're looking at the matrix as a multi-layered system and something we are born into when we take this life, it's almost as if we're truly yet to be born in many aspects. And so what does that make the purpose of the matrix? Why is it that some people never step outside the confines of it? All right, it means that the purpose of this reality and this life is to awaken into who we truly are. And it's to break free from the limitations and the control systems that we are conditioned into at birth so that we can step in as powerful divine creators of reality and really start living. Now, I'm going to break down what the matrix is as a system so we can start to see the types of conditions that we're born into. But really think about that. Change your perception on it, right? If the matrix is a uterus, that means it's necessary for us in many ways. There's no baby without a uterus. No baby without a womb or the mother. All right, so the matrix is a necessary system. at least at this time. And it's for us to learn about ourselves. What's the point of awakening and achieving this sense of actualization if we don't have to go through the trials and tribulations along the way? That's what makes us, right? We have to go through the heartbreak. We have to go through the loss. We have to go through the grief. We have to be so far gone from our soul and get that slap in the face by divinity, and have a glitch in that matrix and like, whoa, shake us to our core, shake us in the soul for us to begin to break free. But it's necessary for us to be confined for some point so it can plant the seeds of our purpose, plant the seeds for us to walk in this reality hand in hand with divinity while armed with an understanding of what the control systems are, right? So in a lot of ways, that matrix, that conditioning, it is necessary. And I'm going to give you guys almost like a multi-dimensional definition, if you will, to kind of break it down further. I believe there are different types of matrices that we are conditioned into: individual level, collective level, spiritual level, right? So I want to break each one down. I think it's important to understand this, that it's not just one thing. Again, it's not just your mind. It's also the culture, right? It's the technology. There's a spiritual component to it as well. So let's break each one down. Let's say we have a psychological matrix, right? This is your mind. This is inside of ourselves. What happens when we're born into this reality? We're hit with belief systems, ideas that we have about the world that are passed down through the generations, passed down through your parents, and it leads to social conditioning, right? What are the norms that you learn at school, in the workplace, behaviors, right? And ultimately, with this psychological matrix, you create internalized narratives of what you believe reality to be, right? And what that ultimately does is you go through different experiences, you go through different trauma, right? And you pick up survival patterns on how to survive, right? It kind of creates a you versus the world type of mentality because this matrix is very limiting. It's very crushing. This society is very crushing. And we have all this trauma. We have all of these experiences that are painful that we wouldn't wish upon anybody else. And so what do we do to survive and to hide that pain as a coping strategy? It's not like we're doing this consciously. I'm sure most people, if they realize the amount of pain and trauma that they're operating on, it would be a big wake-up call of the types of influence that has on your day-to-day decisions and every choice that you make and what you tolerate, right? It all comes back to those survival patterns, how you treat others, how you show up for yourself, how well you take care of yourself, the boundaries that you place. These are all constructed. All facets of your identity are constructed by these survival patterns, and you believe yourself to be those patterns, to be those behaviors, to be this avatar, this character that has been created at a psychological level. It is the mind's construction of who you are. If I were to give you a psychological definition of who I am Evan McDermod. I am 29 years old. I live in South Dakota. I would experience this, that, right? I could give you the list of my experiences, my traumas, my lessons, what I've gone through, all these, my job, what I do for hobbies, for fun, how I take care of myself. I could give you a rundown on all the different character and personality traits, but on a deeper level, especially if you've really gone inward, that's not really who you are. It's an expression of this identity. And so, really, the first facet of the matrix is a psychological identity. And a lot of it to keep you confined is going to be based on trauma. It's going to be keeping you in a loop. It's going to be about survival, right? Right. And then you can, I'd say the next stage of the matrix, if you will, is a cultural matrix. This is the norms. This is the rules. This is the expectations. This is the illusion that there is some sort of consensus reality. Right? What is a consensus reality? You could say like the political system or our modern society or the way we do technological innovation. Right? It's like a unspoken, agreed upon way of being. And what happens when you start to really break outside of that? People judge you. They think you're weird. You're kind of socially outcasted in a lot of ways. I've experienced this many times. Like I've had people turn their back and I'm like, you really? You too? It's a lack of depth in this society, and it's a groupthink and tribal polarity in the purest sense. People are told what to think through these norms, through these conditions, through their own psychological traumas and their own survival loops. And once everybody is running on survival loops, we don't need to talk about them necessarily, but we're all operating under the same mindset, right? And you have this propaganda of what normal is. This is normal reality. This is what makes you normal, fitting in with the culture, fitting in with society, right? So there's two layers of the matrix right there. You got the psychological level and you got the cultural level. And they go hand in hand, right? And really the one that I think is emerging dominantly right now is actually more of a technological matrix. This goes hand in hand with the culture again, but also hand in hand with psychological. They all feed into one another and work in a cohesive harmony. So when you're really doing the work on yourself, you're also starting to see how it works on a societal level. Right? Because there is no separation. That's a key. There's the illusion of separation that we are somehow not connected with one another on the deepest facet of reality. That is what holds this together, right? And again, that comes back to the unified field, which I'm gonna dive into a little bit later. But if we're looking at a technological matrix that really is emerging, it's taken the extreme, I would say, diving into and acceptance of the psychological and cultural matrix in the modern world for us to actually begin to see the shaping of a technological matrix, right? What does an algorithm do? It's feeding you your perception. It's reinforcing your perception. It's shaping your desires. So, that's, and you could say this has been going on for a long time. We look at television, we look at radio, we look at subliminal advertisements. They Live captured this perfectly. The movie They Live captured this perfectly. You put on the glasses, what's behind that advertisement? Obey. Right? And I think we're seeing an emergence of surveillance capitalism in a lot of ways. We're seeing mass surveillance is all over the place. What do you think my phone is doing right now as I'm sitting here? It's sitting over there, listening in, and it's gonna create advertisements. It's probably taking notes. It's like there is a massive level of surveillance that is fueling these algorithms, that is fueling the creation and paving the groundwork for a technocracy where you're going to be predicting behaviors, reinforcing the cultural and psychological matrix through technology, right? And really what we have is an attention economy. That's what all of the phone is built off of. That's why once this phone over here, and I'll show it to you. I got an iPhone. I'm no different than y'all. Once that phone shits the bed, and it's about 5 years old now, it's getting up there. I'm gonna go to a flip phone. That's my plan. Because I can still do like I do some like promotions on like Instagram or TikTok, for example. I can still do that stuff on the computer. I don't need to be glued in, clocked into the matrix all the time in my pocket. I don't need that personally. I don't want that. Um, I think maybe the reason it hasn't shit the bed is because I've been saying that. Because 5 years is a long time for a phone. Like that's a long time. You don't just get a phone for maybe it's been 4.5, like 4.5, 5 years. Like that's pretty unheard of actually. Uh, and I drop it all the time. I'm not very careful with it. So I think maybe they know I'm done after this one, and so they're gonna keep it going, keep it going. We need it. We can't lose him. We can't lose him. Don't let it break. Like you got to keep him in the system. So, but we live in an attention economy. To come back to the point I was making, and it's really a spiritual parasite, I would say. And what does a parasite do? It feeds on the host. It is a one-way beneficial type of relationship. And what is being harvested is our attention. It's our soul, it's our spirit. Instead of going inward with our attention and having time to ponder and look at oneself or think about the world, we are so distracted. We are so obsessed with consumption. And hey, if you're listening to this podcast, what are you doing? You're consuming. Now, I'm not going to tell you to turn it off, obviously. I think this is important information, but we need to be very mindful about how we're consuming. I don't watch a lot of television. I don't listen to a lot of shows. The only thing I might watch is like UFC, and that's because I appreciate martial arts as a sport. I think there's a beauty to it. But we need to be very mindful about the type of things we're consuming and how we spend our time on our phone. Well, how much screen time do you get a day? Right? And there's times where my attention, I feel like it is being harvested. But, I recognize it. I'll come back and I make sure to set time aside for meditation or I'm not plugged in because it's important. It's important. And I would say artificial intelligence, in a lot of ways, is also emerging to help architect perception. Because, again, AI can be beneficial in certain aspects to help uh, can organize. I would say it's a good tool of organization. You kind of, what you put into it, you'll get out of it. But there's a lot of people who go and reinforce their trauma loops or reinforce their beliefs, or they let it do their thinking for them. Like sit and ponder a question instead of going right to AI, right? What do we need an immediate answer for? You can learn more by going inward or having a tool that you can use to express your creativity or your thoughts. You're gonna get a lot more from that than just going and punching it into AI, right? So I really encourage everybody to recognize the way that your technology might be feeding into the psychological and cultural uh, programs that live within your own perception, right? And I would say there is more of also a metaphysical matrix in certain aspects. I mean, let's say you look at the concept of like samsara, right? And I don't know, you could say Hindu or in the Hindu aspect or the Buddhist aspect, right? If we're going to look specifically at the Hindu aspect, I mean, that's based on like, it's almost like a soul. I've heard it called a soul trap, where your soul keeps reincarnating and reincarnating based on the cycles of karma that you accumulate. And your work is through the Dharma to liberate oneself, if you will, right? And so at a certain level, I think there's truth to that. And if you're going to reincarnate based on what you're still holding on to, then goes and determines your next life. And it creates this almost infinite loop of the human experience, but suffering in particular. Right. So if you can let go and you can surrender sort of the ties that you have on a soul level, that creates, if you're to put it in a Buddhist term, that creates nirvana, that creates that enlightenment. It creates the ability to sort of let go of the need to even reincarnate. And because what is beyond? What is beyond for the soul? Right? How many times do we got to keep coming back? At what point do we say, all right, I'm ready for the next adventure? I'm ready for whatever's next. right? Because the soul is infinite. Reality is infinite. This is the this world, this earth, this reality that we're living in. This is just one expression of reality in a third dimensional level. All right, and if we live in a multidimensional reality and we can't perceive a lot of it, what else can the soul experience when we lose the limitation of the body? All right, it's a deep spiritual question. And obviously, us being three-dimensional, we can't really come up with a solid framework on what that would be. But there's a level of faith and there's a level of knowing and trust that you have to have within the process and within what reality actually is once you start to understand it, and that there are levels, right? After this lifetime, I'm done. I'm done. It's simple as that, right? My work in this life is to liberate myself from all aspects of the matrix so that I can be awakened while I'm here and spread love and compassion and beauty, but then move on in the hero's journey and be, hey, what else we got on this? What else we got? Let's keep going. And they say, and take this as you will. I think I talked with Brendan Murphy about this on a podcast at one point. It wasn't the most, I don't know if it was the most recent one. I don't remember which one, but it's something he's talked about quite a bit. Where, and I know David Icke has talked about this too, where they tell you not to go towards the light after you die. It's almost like you got a choice. If you go towards the light, are you going to come back and reincarnate? Or are you going to follow, go into the shadows, go into the darkness? There might be a soul candle burning, a small light off in the distance. But ultimately, that's what the hero's journey is. Is it what? Is it not? It's stepping into the unknown. So, and that made me really think, like, all right, if I'm presented with some sort of choice at the end of my life, I don't really know. But in theory, if I were, maybe the true path of liberation is by going away from the light and venturing off into the unseen worlds. Maybe the light is just coming back into the earth, coming back into the body. I don't really know. But we got to recognize there are dimensions of consciousness that are beyond the perceptual veil. And there's some great information out there breaking down each level of consciousness. I'm not going to do that in this episode. I think that's one I would like to do in the future. So you can, subscribe and tune in. We'll break it down later on. But just remember, the spiritual matrix, the spiritual component aspect is confining your perception to view this experience, these five senses as the basis of reality. And it might be the basis of your experience and your thoughts and your identity, but who you are is much deeper than that. So let's kind of unpack now that we got the different tiers and understandings that there are different levels to it. Let's kind of look at some of the architecture, if you will, and how it's actually imposed. And I kind of talked a little bit about some of this already. I think a big one and a big thing is almost like a narrative imposition. And when I say that, that's really the stories. I've said many times on this show, we are the stories that we tell ourselves. That's true on an individual level, and it's true on a collective level, right? So we inherit stories of dissonance, of fear, of separation, instead of telling stories and choosing stories that are in alignment with the soul. Now, I do believe there are points of our history where we lived in alignment with more myths that spoke to the truth of the human experience and this multidimensional reality, but we have lost touch with those, right? So recognize the stories that you're telling yourself, because ultimately what they're doing is they are creating a programmed construct of your identity and who you believe yourself to be. Society has really weaponized the use of stories and myth to shape who you think you are. They tell you from the moment you're born, this is what you are. Do not question that. Do not step outside of these boxes. Behave in this fashion. Follow these norms. Right? And how is that reinforced? It's through fear, but then it's through reward mechanisms, right? We've seen over the last 5 years, this is recorded in 2025. If somebody's tuning in long in the future, hello, welcome from the past. But we've seen pretty clearly, not just in the last 5 years. I mean, if you don't see it in the last 5 years, I don't know what to tell you. But throughout this society and the shaping of these matrices, how fear is used to keep people compliant and to reinforce behavior and really to reinforce totalitarian measures. We're on the totalitarian tiptoe, as David Icke likes to call it, where you have problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem which causes, oh, I just smashed into the microphone here. You create a problem which causes a mass reaction, a hysteria, a panic, a fear, and based on that fear, you impose your desired solution. And the problem was created with that solution in mind. That's how it works, right? And so in order to keep people compliant and in order to go down the totalitarian tiptoe, which is leading us into a technological mass control grid, so that we can have the harmonious integration and full, almost an inescapable matrix in a certain aspect through the tech overlords. That's what they would like it to be. You have the totalitarian tiptoe where we impose a little bit here. We add a little bit more here. Oh, we're going to make you have digital ID here. Oh, you got to get shots here. Oh, you got to do this. You got to do that. You got to do that. And eventually, it's a tiptoe. It's slow. You can't just do it all at once or people are going to be like, hold up. That's too much, right? But if you do it slowly, generally, people don't really pay attention. We're too distracted. So if it's one small thing that might impose on freedom, that might push the boundary a little bit, people are like, that's interesting, but okay. It might lead to this down the line. And you'll hear that, but people will still go along with it because that thing that's down the line is not here yet. And eventually you have enough steps to where that thing down the line is here and they still say the same thing. So fear is weaponized in all aspects. And ultimately, what is it that keeps people distracted? You get the reward through the compliance, right? There's a false sense of fulfillment that comes when you toe the line. Like, oh, look at me. I'm a moral, upstanding citizen. Why do you think people in 2021, 2022 were so demonized when they refused to go and receive a specific medical product? Why were they so demonized by the controllers of our society and then by the population itself? The reason was that it was a reward system for the people who towed the line, for the people who were like, oh yeah, I'll go along with this. Right? They wanted to give them a sense of purpose, a sense of virtue. So it's a weaponized virtue through these false rewards. You know, and I would say there's almost like a dopamine matrix that goes along with it too. You consume, you scroll, you become numb, and you see all these things taking place, and you become complacent because there is no reaction. People who are disconnected from their own moral value system, who are disconnected from their soul, they can't question reality. If you're disconnected from yourself, you're going to be disconnected from the truth of the world. It's as simple as that, right? You can't question reality without questioning yourself. Know thyself and know thy reality, because there is no separation. Right? And the illusion of separation, again, this is another way that the matrix is reinforced, because we live in duality, right? That is just a small fragmentation of the unified field. We have me versus the world. The separation creates competition, it creates conflict, it creates control. Think of a forest. All right. This is how I'm going to explain the unified field. We are electromagnetic beings at our core. Think of a forest. Underneath a forest, you have all your individual trees, all right? But underneath the forest, what we tend to not realize is that the root system is all interconnected. The trees are in constant, you could say, oneness, unity with one another, feeding each other nutrients, sending signals to other trees. It'd be like if a tree is getting attacked by some sort of termite, for example, it is able to send a signal through the root system to other trees so that other trees put up a poison defense system so that the termite cannot get to the other trees. Right? It's no different than your brain responding to something in your body that's signaling pain, right? And you put up your own defenses and you put up your right. That's how it works. It's a shared mind. So you could say a forest, even though you have individual trees, they are one organism in many aspects. And when you really start to understand the unified field of consciousness and you apply it to human beings, you realize we are no different. And what is it that interconnects us? You could say, oh, but Evan, here I am sitting as a separate being, a separate entity. There is no physical connection. That is true, but when you look on a multi-dimensional level and you start going inward, the mind, which is the projector of reality, there is a collective mind. There is a collective consciousness and there is a collective unconscious, similar to how we have our conscious mind and unconscious mind. Now, where it gets interesting, right? There's examples on how both your collective mind will shape the collective consciousness and how your unconscious mind will shape the unconscious. Right? There is many instances where somebody will speak an idea into existence, just talk about it, and then that creation, that innovation pops up all over the world at this, like basically at the same time. And there's no connection between any of the cultures. There are many examples of that. Right? And if you were to look at an unconscious level, when you start to go inward, the unconscious mind in the brain is ruled by electromagnetism. Right? And electromagnetism is what interconnects and permeates through all of reality. So you have a thought that's in the unconscious level. You go inward and you start reprogramming your unconscious mind, right? That then projects outward into the unified field and you shape your reality, right? You can shape your relationships, you can shape your job, you can shape what type of experiences you're going to have, how people are going to treat you based on your own internal projection system, right? This is how the essence of telepathy works. I've talked about this on another podcast. You go inward and you connect with the other unconscious mind of another person. You can start sending signals to one another. Now, if that other person is not really like tapped into that, I mean, it's going to be a lot of unconscious signals, but it's how when you think of somebody and then they call you, it's the same type of deal. That's one clear-cut example, and we've all experienced something like that where, that's seemingly a coincidence. I was just thinking about this person. Right? You need to start recognizing that those coincidences are not random. We create them. They are synchronicities. All right, so that is what the unified field is. And when you have an understanding and awareness of the electromagnetism and the fact that this is who we are, and this is what we're capable of, all of these programs of the matrix that are reinforced on us, they start to break down. I think the illusion of separation is the one thing holding it all together at the core, at the root. If we're looking at like we want to call it the Wetiko virus, like when I talked with Paul Levy and he came on and talked about Wetiko, I think the core of Wetiko, the mind parasite, is the illusion of separation. It's not knowing of who we are on the deepest level and understanding the unified field of consciousness that we are part of. It's very simple once you start breaking it down. It's not, and when I first started hearing about this and kind of intellectualizing the illusion of separation, it felt like a handful to try and explain. But once you experience it, it makes perfect sense and it doesn't really need much explanation. You feel it and you start embodying it and you start recognize it and then you start dictating your reality. That's what it takes, right? But we have to go through the levels of conditioning and the dissonance, at least in this reality right now, to break into that, to break through to that, to awaken. And that's what the Matrix is doing. It's giving us an opportunity to take the experiences, for us to look at them and see that we are creating those experiences, right? That's enough for unified field for at least right now. But time, I want to say time is another control mechanism. I think we live in a culture that really worships productivity. It's almost its own religion, efficiency. And that really plays in the technological matrix of things, right? I've had plenty of conversations with James Tunney where we are becoming automatons, where we are measured by efficiency and feeding the machine, the system. And a lot of people use this idea that we don't have enough time for things. I never have enough time. I got to work. I got to do this. I got to take care of the kids. I got to do that. Yeah, you got a lot on your plate, but how can you complain when you came here to eat? You know what I mean? Like, we have to make time for things. When you start kind of breaking free from the trap of time, you just start more flowing and doing what you need to do, and you don't think about the timing aspect so much. So, kind of break free from your need to be so grounded within time. Obviously, there are elements of society that we have to participate in, and timing matters. To be early is to be on time. To be on time is to be late, and to be late is unacceptable. I still believe in that. I still live by that. Um, but in many ways, you can't be dictated by time. Time needs to be dictated by you. And I think really the last control mechanism that I want to point out is that reduction of the mystery and spirit. You know what I mean? Materialism is the dominant dogma in our culture. I mean, you could say it's religion, you could say it's this, you could say it's that, but what's the one thing everybody buys into? It's materialism, it's consumption. So recognize how your own dogma, your own beliefs really reinforces your own, I would say, disconnect from spirit, from the mystery itself. Does everything really need to be explained? Does the unknown really need to be dismissed? Are you denying your soul to maintain an illusion that was programmed into you? Think about that one. Now, who benefits from the Matrix? Obviously, it's important to talk about who benefits from the Matrix. We kind of got to break down on what it is, but who is benefiting from its operation? And I would say it is not individuals. It is not the individuals, any individual. It is the system itself. Now, there are certain individuals who make themselves very wealthy based on the Matrix. You could argue they benefit in certain aspects. Maybe they do. But I would say it's the bureaucracies. It's the corporations. It's the government. It's the algorithms. It's the institutions that survive by reinforcing consensus reality. Do any of those things have your best interest in mind? Many politicians will claim to, and I think there are certain politicians who go into politics with good intentions, right? But once you get into that swamp, you realize what the system is. That's why I don't vote. That's why I don't really participate because I understand the type of change that we are talking about. It's not going to come from the system that is complete contradiction to the type of reality that we want to live in, right? And I would say all of these entities are very much an energetic parasite. The government is a parasite. The corporations are parasites. The algorithms are parasites. And why is that? It's because they harvest your mind, your energy, your soul. Now, the thing is, you allow them to do it based on how you choose to spend your time, based on the choices you make, based on the decisions where you voluntarily give away your own power, right? And I would say a lot of these, they're not literal entities necessarily. I think a lot of these are energetic parasites in a sense. And they're almost archetypal. You know, they use fear, attention, and they use that and they use it for control to harvest energy. That's why I really like the analogy as within the Matrix, mankind is essentially a battery. That's why the movie does a really good job of depicting that, or we're essentially batteries for a larger machine, right? You've heard the term loot thrown around. It's a very old esoteric term. So, and I think the most important thing that benefits from it, but also reinforces it, it is the unconscious collective. It is the people who reinforce these systems of control. It is the Agent Smiths who don't know they are Agent Smiths. It's through peer pressure. It's through the cultural narratives. It's the fear of stepping into their own true power. It's why people will go to the extreme to defend their belief systems, to defend their traditions, to defend what it is that they think they know. And they're willing to die to do it because they can't imagine a life where their illusionary identity becomes shattered. And who they are is much deeper than what they can even begin to imagine. And you really have to go into a death moment when that shattering happens. I mean, it's ego death. And people are so afraid to die in a literal sense. Of course, they're going to fear ego death. So it is the people who choose to reinforce it, who benefit from this system. It's like creating the ultimate nanny state because we are unable to take care of ourselves and really hold ourselves accountable. So we rely on the culture. We rely on the governments. We rely on all of these other Agent Smiths to continue to play pretend so that we don't have to wake up to who we truly are and take accountability for that. It's pretty fucked up, ain't it? It's pretty fucked up. Can you take responsibility for your own role in the Matrix? Ask yourself. For the way that you walk in this world that reinforces the cultural programming, that reinforces the division, that reinforces the illusion of separation. Are you able to take responsibility for that? And if you are, welcome in. We're about to create a better reality, baby. So let's look at what are some signs you might be living in the Matrix? What are some signs? What are the symptoms? If it's a parasite, and it's almost like a diseased state of mind. That means there's symptoms, right? And I think in a lot of ways, it's like that recognition that life is scripted in certain aspects. And that's all there is to life. There's the script. You're born, you go to school, you grow up, you get a job, you have a family, you survive, and then you retire. And that's all there is. There's nothing more to do, right? We found the perfect script, the perfect, most efficient operating mode. And people can't dare to think outside of that. Hey, I get it. I mean, that's what we're told to do. That's in while benefiting the system and society, it is the most efficient operating system for the individual to live a comfortable existence. And that's why people choose it. They choose that script. And that's all right. I get it. I understand it because it's not going to push your buttons. You'll certainly have your own personal hardships and challenges, but it's not going to push your buttons. You're not going to be outcasted from society. You're going to play a part in society. In theory, you're going to be bettering the society. But what are you bettering? You might be providing for your family, which is noble. You might be doing something that is of service to people, which is also noble. There's a place for a lot of the people that there's purpose and meaning, and a lot of the work that is done within it. Don't get me wrong. But if all of your life is the script, what are you doing for you? We forget about ourselves. We sacrifice ourselves at this altar. And there's a lot of people who are going to argue that's noble. And I get it. There is a necessary level of self-sacrifice that we do need to have in this life. But at the same time, if you sacrifice yourself too early, you're never going to reach your true potential of who you are. You need to lock in for yourself first. You need to establish your own identity beyond what has been told to you. And if you just accept and you numb the soul, you're never going to reach that. And you're actually reinforcing the same thing for your children and your grandchildren. But the beauty of it is it's never too late in the same aspect, right? It's never too late to actually wake up and see who you are. All it takes is questioning the script. It's like the Truman Show. What happens when he realizes that his whole existence is a lie and it's all a script? And it's funny, man, because there's a lot of people I've met who will talk bad on that, or people who like even bring up the Truman Show as a depiction of reality, and they're like, man, that's some like schizo stuff, right? Like they'll throw around demonizing terminology and demonizing words, and like people who think like that are, they're crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. Like some people just see beyond the veil. I know that this is, where do you think they get those ideas for that type of movie? Of course it's the truth. They got to show it to you. They got to show it to you so then you consent to it. You have free will in this. Because the controllers of the Matrix, and here's the thing, I don't think there is one individual controller. I think it is a self-reinforcing system. You could make the argument. You could start getting into the talks about like Anunnaki and all that. I'm not going to do that on this show. You have your own opinions on the origins and ideas and all that stuff. Maybe we'll dive into some Anunnaki later on, and because I think it's a cool theory. And you start getting this is where David Icke starts getting in trouble when he starts talking about like, or people available as him as crazy, and they start talking about the reptilian forces, and they start talking about all of these other beings who might be wielding mankind like they're marionettes on strings, right? And I think there's probably some truth to that, but that's not the point of this podcast. Is we're not trying to get to the who is the one controlling us, because then again it reinforces the us versus them mentality, and that's the mindset we actually need to lose if we're gonna break down and begin to break down the matrix and then begin to construct our own reality. It doesn't matter who those people are because we still have free will and we choose this, right? So, I mean, I view the system in itself as a self-reinforcing entity, a parasite in its own right, that takes the energy of mankind, conditions them at birth to then go and live a life that is in betterment of this self-reinforcing uh, system, cultural system, right? But so we got the script, and you need to break free from the script. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. There's people who are not going to want you to break from the script, and they can't imagine a life outside of that script of benefiting themselves, benefiting their family, or why it benefits. Because you have everything to lose in the material aspect when you start questioning the script itself. Everything. All the material wealth, all of the job security, all these things, you start to question them and you realize how shallow they are. And people don't start questioning because they don't recognize how much abundance is present even when you let those things go. Right? Another aspect of you living inside the matrix, outside just the script, recognize your own emotional patterns. Emotional patterns is a big one. What do you continually attract into your life? Now, I actually just put up a TikTok and Instagram reel today. Go follow me on there. Um, like closure, and it's an example, like a closure in a relationship, for example. Right? A lot of times people like when a relationship ends, or let's say they get ghosted, and this was in my case, right? Let's say you get ghosted by somebody you really care about, and you like almost you envision a whole future, right? And you really see the beauty and the potential in that person. And then he ghosts you, and you're like, whoa, 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 I need closure. I want some sort of like, I want some sort of conclusion because it's just boom, abrupt, right? And so the need for closure, really all you're doing is you're seeking validation from the source of pain itself. And then what you're doing by reinforcing that you need the validation from the pain, maybe you get it, right? But then the very next time something like that happens again, your self-worth and your ability to have a grasp on your emotions, it's in the hands of the other person, right? All of these things that happen to us, we're not always responsible for them, but they serve as an opportunity for us to go inward with them, right? You don't need to go outside of yourself after something like this happens. You need to take what's left, and a lot of times that is the pain, that is the heartache, that is that fire that was left behind, and you got to put it out. The job is then to go inward with it and to sit with it and see what you can learn from it and to recognize your own power, recognize your own self-worth and who you are and how resilient you ultimately are. So these emotional happenings and the types of lessons that we attract into our life and the types of emotional patterns that are based on our psychological matrices, right? And if you have something that is continually repeating and you can't get a grasp on it, that's on you. You're going to attract the same type of person over and over and over again until you decide that you're going to change the way you think and behave. Doesn't justify the action somebody takes on you, but you can take some responsibility for the fact if you are repeatedly attracting something in, the source of that is you. Because we, again, through the magnetic field, we consciously or unconsciously create our reality. So what type of reality are you creating? What type of beliefs are you reinforcing through your emotional reactions and your emotional patterns? That's the you want to talk about inner work, you want to talk about shadow work, that's what that is. That's what it's about in looking at those things and actually choosing to reprogram your mind. And it's difficult to do. It's not easy. I tried doing it for a long time and I without success. And it's really only been in the last year or so that I've really kind of figured it out for myself on how to do it. But it took a lot of trial and error, man. And it took a lot of me repeating the same shit to realize I wasn't doing it properly. So, and hey, again, happy to work with people one on one in this type of deal, through like tarot, for example. So if you're interested in doing that, I mean, I got like kind of found the key, if you will. I'm not going to say I know it all. I don't. And every situation is unique, but to actually shape your conscious mind or your unconscious mind, which then shapes your conscious mind, hey, you can make it happen. Anybody can do it. It's very simple. It's not simple, but it is. Um, Another one, chronic fear. I mean, if we're living in a state of fear, I don't think we always recognize when fear is even present because we're so used to living in it. It's being in survival mode, the fight or flight response, or we freeze, or we fear disappointing others. And we people please, right? That's a form of fear. People pleasing is a form of fear. And I'm guilty of that so much in the past, right? You don't want to say no. And hey, you want to be giving, you want to be loving, you want to be this. But is it truly love if you are sacrificing your own boundaries and sovereignty and your own self-worth? I don't think that's love. That's need. That's dependency. I think a lot of people also live on autopilot. We all know what that means. If you're living inside the matrix and you're on autopilot, that's another example. Disconnected from the soul and the voice. How many of the listeners here feel disconnected from their soul? How many of you know there is more out there, but you're not quite sure how to reach it? Reflect on those points of your life. I mean, I lived like that for a long time. I didn't know how to really. I've had tastes of divinity and tastes with spirits, and I had a lot of paranormal experiences, for example, when I was younger. So I kind of always knew about the spiritual world. Not there was more out there, um, but I didn't really know how to reach it. So I just kind of not ignored it, but I just kept living the life I was living because I didn't know anything else. I didn't know what true spiritual practice meant. Right? I had to really find my way without a structure. And I think sometimes the dogmatic structures actually hold us back from really, uh, we get a taste of God, we get a taste of spirituality through maybe a religious dogma, right? But then that's it. We find God through a church, we don't find God in our own heart. Is that true spirituality? Religion can serve as a framework for true spirituality if you allow it to. It's just not everybody, most people don't reach that point. And they see God as something outside of themselves instead of recognizing it lives within your own heart and your own conscious mind, and you can go inward and feel that connection at any point. And I think ultimately everybody feels the pull to awakening. Everybody experiences the matrix glitches, if you will. They experience synchronicities, deja vu, strange coincidences. They experience all these things. Like we're not fully tapped into what is there, but most people don't know how to conceptualize or put that into practice and explore it. And ultimately, that's what this podcast is here to do. It's to give you the tools to run with it, to go on the hero's journey, to break free from the fear, to feel empowered. And if you can do that, you feel empowered, stepping beyond the veil, nothing's going to stop you. So, what are those moments of awakening? What are the signs you're breaking free? I mean, again, I just mentioned synchronicities. This is the spiritual code, the framework revealing itself, right? It's like reality kind of giving you that little wink, saying, "Hey, you recognize me? I am you." There is no such thing as a coincidence. Even a coincidence when you break down the word co inside of us. Coincidence, co inside us. We generate synchronicity because we are the synchronicity. I'm going to say that again. We generate synchronicity because we are the synchronicity. We create miracles because we are the miracle. And it sounds so simple. Oh, it sounds a little complex, but it's very simple. And it comes back to that unified field, the electromagnetic frequency that interconnects all of reality and is the driving force of reality. That's why I talked about the unified field. That's why I thought it was important to break that down to that level. Because then you start to understand synchronicity. When you start to flow, synchronicity is there all over the place. You ain't got to look for them. But every once in a while, let's say you're in that dissonance, you're trapped in fear, you might get a synchronicity that pierces the veil of reality to a level that you cannot go back. And that's what they're there to do. But you got to choose to run with it. You got to see the synchronicity and you got to essentially walk off the cliff and trust that you're either going to fly or be caught by the hands of God. And one of the two will happen. But most people, they just see the rocks below and assume they're going to hit them. And I think we also, and this is a tough one to do. And it's been tough for me in many ways, but we need to feel a sense of gratitude. We don't need to, but I would encourage it to feel a sense of gratitude for the trauma and the suffering that you have endured because it serves as an opportunity for you to go inward and awaken and recognize that you are not the trauma, you are not the things that have happened to you. You are not the set of your experiences. You are not the thoughts. You are not the depression. You are not the mental illness. You are not any of these things. You are not any of the labels. You are not the heartbreak. It's not your fault. These things are not your fault. I think true initiation into spirituality comes in the form of collapse. It comes in the form of breakdown. It's that feeling that the walls are caving in and you don't got any solution. So what do? You surrender. You let go. You accept it. You see it as it is. And when you do that, it's almost as if a light comes on. It's as if those walls collapse. And you hear the birds start to sing, the lights start to shine in. You recognize from the ashes, there you stand, and there's a beauty that's present. It takes courage to get through heartache. It takes courage to get through trauma. And there's a lot of people who hold on to it and they can't let go of it. And they can't let go of it because they got to feel. Most people do not want to feel. That's why they numb themselves. You're not what happened to you. You're not your experiences. And those experiences are not your fault. Choose to feel them and honor them and recognize that pain is a teacher and that it might hurt like all hell, but it's forging resilience. And from the other side, you will emerge. And a tool that's being used for healing big time right now is psychedelics like ayahuasca, psilocybin. And what it does when you go into those altered states of consciousness, for example, you could even say a peak experience. I've had powerful meditation experiences that were as powerful as psychedelic experiences, right? So it doesn't always have to be through psychedelics. But what they're doing is they tune you to more of the perceptual reality. You kind of go beyond what your normal preconceived senses are because it blocks um, certain chemicals from the brain being released. It allows you to take in a little bit more of the truth. You see reality more for what it is, this multi-dimensional field of magnetism. All right, that's why when you have a psychedelic experience, you can't really articulate it in a fashion that really allows somebody to know it unless they experience it. Right? And again, that doesn't mean go and use psychedelics willy-nilly. I say that with caution in the sense where you really need to have proper intention and understand that it can be a death process. Even negative trips, they're there to awaken you to what is living inside of you and the reality that you are creating and projecting. It's all a projection. Don't like the projection, change the lens. And the lens is your perception. And, I think it's important to recognize that I I don't think we're here to escape the matrix. I don't think escaping is the goal necessarily. Because you can't escape consciousness itself. The goal is to transcend and see through the illusion, the constructs of the matrix, because what happens when you do that? That uterus gives birth to the actualized being that you are, and you really step into the world and you see beyond the veil. So what does that mean? How do you do that? You reclaim your own narrative. You reclaim your own personal story, like we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, with stories shaping reality. You got to become the author of your own life. And it sounds cliche, but we just talked about all the ways to do that. Cliches tend to have the deepest truths. There's a reason they're cliche and people scoff at them because they know they're fucking true. Find the ways that'll work for you to move from a programmed sense of identity into a soul authored identity. And I really think mystery and spirituality, I mean, for me, that's the gateway. It's the sense of awe, it's the sense of wonder, it's the beauty, it's embracing the stillness and recognizing that I learn more by going inward than I can from reading any book or watching any program or listening to any podcast. The answers are not out there, they're in here, they're in our own heart, they're in our own mind. They're in the unified field that we have access to inward. Right? It's in the stillness. Go sit on a mountaintop and overlook the world. And you'll learn more from that mountaintop than you'll learn from any book that you pick up. Nature and the electromagnetic field as a whole has its own operating system. And we have created a matrix on an individual level, a cultural and societal level, a technological level, even on a spiritual level, through dogmatic ideas that disconnect us from the mystery, right? But when you reconnect with it, it awakens that higher self, the true observer, beyond the name, the identity, the stories. And that's the actual architect behind the architected identity and the architect of reality. It's the architect, the soul. Like that's what it is. You get to choose your reality when you're playing from that level instead of inheriting reality. I would encourage everybody to almost live their life more symbolically than literally. And what do I mean by that? It's like taking a mythic approach, walking the hero's journey. Go study Joseph Campbell's framework. I think it's a beautiful representation of the cycles of life, especially from a spiritual context, to how we can begin to awaken and understand ourselves. Like, we are the ultimate protagonists. There's nothing wrong with almost embracing that. You can call it a God complex if you want. I don't think there's anything wrong with embracing that and embracing that you are the creator of your reality. Some people are going to call it ego. Some people are going to call it selfishness. But is the true selfishness is hiding who you are from the world and choosing to hold back and choosing to silence the truth because you fear the consequences of it. You know, the Matrix itself was never really a prison. I mean, for those who awaken to the reality of it, it becomes a canvas. The question is not whether the Matrix is real, the world is real, but whether you are actually awake inside of it. Can you choose to see the truth unguarded, maybe for the very first time? And what does that look like? What does that feel like? I can't answer that for you. Be the savior you've needed. There's nobody else coming. And when you do that, you almost build an inner authority, and you don't need to seek external permission or go by the patterns that you're so accustomed to. You don't need permission to be who you are. And you know who you are on the deepest level. Stop holding yourself back. You do the world a disservice if you do that. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it for yourself, do it for those you care about. Show up for them in that way. And you'll find it'll connect you with the soul. The path will become clear. It's a beautiful time to be alive, in my opinion, and because we have the gift of having a certain level of material comfort within the system that can almost support a spiritual quest and a spiritual awakening. And that can be the focus and have a reclamation of the human soul in the modern world. There's no greater gift than to embark upon that path. And if you're listening to this, it's because that's what you're here to do. You didn't find this by accident. There's no such thing as a coincidence. So take those first steps. You're supported. I say that's a good stopping point for the podcast. I don't have too much else to dive into. I would say we did a pretty good breakdown. Let me know what y'all think about it in the comments. Um, I'd be curious to know what other aspects of the Matrix do you recognize, or what may have I have missed that's important to highlight. What resonated the most? I'd love some feedback. Because I don't do a ton of deep dives, but I feel like doing more of them. So, and it can be a collaborative effort. And if you got ideas or topics that you want me to explore, let me know in the comments. I'd love to do listener based requests, depending on what y'all want. I mean, I'll probably find it pretty interesting. If you're here listening to me talk about this stuff and you find it interesting, I'll probably find it interesting, whatever you're interested in. You know what I mean? Like it's reciprocal. It's reciprocal. I'm a human being too. I ain't no robot up here doing these shows. I, I'm, I'm a curious cat. I'll tell you. It's got me in trouble quite a few times. Um, But that's all right. That's all right. That's what we're here to do. We're here to break down the norms, break down the conditions, break down the accepted programs, and create our own stories, if you will. But that's going to wrap up this podcast. I had a good time doing this. I feel like I learned something doing this too, and that's partly why I do it. Because it kind of bridges my own understanding when I can hop on here and just start connecting some dots. And I lay out some ideas for myself ahead of time. but really just bullet points. So then and then I'm through just speaking and kind of letting the thoughts run, I end up connecting more things for myself. So I'm appreciative when I come out on the other side of a podcast like this. It's a little intimidating to step into because you never know exactly where you're going to go with it. It's like stepping into the unknown, kind of what we just talked about, but that's why I do it. It's really for me in that way. Um, and if anybody can listen and benefit from it, well, shit, that's wonderful. That's why I put it up. One person comes in, listen to it, wonderful, fantastic. I'm glad you took something from it and you're a little more empowered walking your path. That's what it's all about, baby. Um, but head on over to Substack, McDermod.substack.com. Purchase a copy of my poetry book, Seasons of Becoming. I got signed copies available. Just let me know, hit me up. And if you want to work one-on-one, the link to do so is down in the episode show notes below the description box. Y'all know how to work a description box. Y'all are tech wizards, probably more than I am. So hit me up, make it happen. But that's going to wrap up this show, and I will see you all next time. So long.